As the interim alpha of the largest pack in the country, I was delayed from picking up my mate due to lost car keys. And a pack member named Alex, whom I had never really noticed, ended up saving my partner. Welcome to the Alpha's Love channel. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. 33. Grey. Saying I was furious would be the understatement of the century. Saying I was scared, however, would be an even bigger understatement. They had almost taken my mate. My queen had very narrowly missed ending up in the hands of maniacs. Worse still, she had been saved by Alex, a guy I had never really noticed in the pack. That's who saved my mate. Me? Where was I, looking for my car keys? The very thought infuriated me. I was a werewolf. Interim alpha of the biggest pack in the country, and one of the largest in the world. And lost car keys delayed me from going to pick my mate up on time. What if Alex hadn't been driving by? What if he hadn't felt the urge to rescue the girl surrounded by men, without even realizing who she was at first? What would they have done to my Gracie? That infuriated me again. What were they going to do with Gracie? A month had passed since the discovery of this chosen one, and we hadn't gotten any more information, which was weird because there's always a blabbermouth in every pack. Alphas prefer to forget about that fact, but unfortunately, it was true. There was always a wolf who'd be happy to talk for a little reward. But none of the other packs we'd interrogated had any idea where or who the chosen one was. Some of them had never even heard of him. If their objective had been to kill her, they had more than enough time today, but they didn't. They wanted to take her away. Put stage 4 lockdown in place immediately. Two of the men before me nodded and left the room, leaving me with Mason and Ryan. I settled back in my chair. Okay, brief me. Both of them sat also. We haven't spoken to Tamara yet to get her side of the story, so we are only aware of what happened after Alex got there, Mason explained. He said he was driving to the Joes with a friend when he saw a girl surrounded by 4 men. He didn't know what was happening but stopped the car. By that time, they had put a chloroform-soaked handkerchief on her face, and she was struggling. So, his friend and him attacked the men. Only that it wasn't as easy as he had been expecting. He said the men were stronger than normal humans. And then that was when you arrived. Apparently, if you hadn't come just then, Alex and his friend would have been killed and Tamara would have been taken. And Gracie's still passed out? I asked. Yeah, the pack doctor says she'll wake up soon though. She didn't inhale a lot of the chemical. I nodded. Were you able to track down the guy who ran? Ryan shook his head. Not yet. Some wolves are still following his scent. So Alex said they were humans, yeah. He said they smelt like humans, but obviously, they didn't fight like them. 2 werewolves versus 4 human men should have been easy game, but Alex and his friend were easily overpowered. I thought about it. They smelt like the wolf from the Halloween party. Like Scott. Like creatures trying to smell like humans. You keep saying creatures, Grey, began Mason, not werewolves. That's it, I'm not sure they are werewolves. Gracie. I groaned as my eyes slowly adjusted to the bright lights in the room. My head felt as if it was stuffed with wool. Where was I? And then it all came stampeding back to me. Oh God. How was I going to get out of here? Oh, you're awake, the lady walking into the room noted. She was short with salt and pepper, hair pulled back so tight that my headache intensified just looking at it. She advanced towards me, clipboard in hand. Stay away from me. I looked around for something I would be able to use as a weapon, but the room was as clean as a psych ward. Did Grey know I had been kidnapped? Was he looking for me? I didn't do anything. Just let me go, please. What are you going on about now? She muttered, as she got to my bed. You're on red water moon territory. My eyes widened. Grey. Yes, yes, you're in the Alpha's house, she said impatiently. How are you feeling? My heart was beating wildly in my chest. I hadn't been kidnapped. What in the world had happened? Dear. Huh? How are you feeling? Oh, I paused. I have a headache. To be expected, she grabbed a glass of water from the small table next to the bed along with some pills. Here, take these. I gratefully gulped the cool water, wrinkling my nose as I swallowed the pills. Can I see Grey? She collected the glass from me. I'll tell the Alpha you're awake. She left the room, her sensible shoes clicking all the way, and I leaned back on my headboard, staring at the white ceiling. A short while later, the door burst open and Grey rushed in. Gracie. He clumsily hugged me. How are you feeling? As if somebody knocked me over with a log. I winced. My head is pounding. Can't you give her some painkillers? He barked at the doctor. I attempted a smile. Calm down, she already gave me something for the headache. Are you hurt? Nope, you're sure? He looked into my eyes, smoothing my hair. Yeah. The door opened again, and this time it was Ryan and Mason. Grace balls. Are you okay? Ryan asked, shoving himself between Grey and I and hugging me. I laughed. Yes. Good, do not scare me like that again, young lady. I saw Grey look pointedly at the doctor, and she bowed slightly, and left the room immediately. Grey turned back to me. Baby, I know you just woke up, but do you think you can tell us what happened? I'm sure I started from when Scott left, then when I noticed the people staring at me, leaving the diner, the man, the other men, and finally, passing out after struggling with the man who put the handkerchief on my face. The expression on Grey's face was undecipherable by the time I finished. His expression was taut and his eyes dark. Okay, so you guys fill me in on how I got here. I quickly moved on. I listened as they explained how I'd been rescued. One more thing, I said as they finished. The guy at the diner, the one who sat beside me, he smelt different. They all exchanged meaningful looks. It was Grey who spoke. What do you mean, baby? He smelled like Scott 34. Gracie. The week following that was one of the most boring weeks of my life. Grey declared a lockdown, which meant nobody could go in or come out of the pack houses, both our house and the other pack house. Which meant I was stuck inside the house practically alone. Grey and the boys were in the house with me, but they invariably spent all day locked in Grey's office trying to find the guys that had tried to kidnap me. And so, I spent my days in front of the large flat-screen TV in the living room, or scrolling through social media on my phone. I had missed the project I was supposed to do with Scott, but Grey had assured me that I wouldn't fail the class, something about the principal not daring to. Even then, I felt guilty about just leaving Scott high and dry. I hadn't even been able to call him and give him a heads up that I wouldn't be in school because Grey had asked me not to contact him. He was now the prime suspect in my kidnapping investigation. Grey had taken it very seriously when I had made the stupid comment that the men smelt like Scott. Why did I say that? It's not like I knew what Scott smelt like, so why did I have to say that? He had been trying to reach me on Instagram, Facebook, even called me a few times, and I had ignored everything. It was getting increasingly difficult to do that though, because he now sent at least 10 messages every day. You weren't at school again today. Fruits. Where are you? I want to assume you're with your boyfriend since he hasn't been to school either. Did he do something to you? Are you okay? Are you even in Valley Hill? Why are you ignoring me? Your last scene was just 5 minutes ago. Are you mad at me? Did I do something? Yo? I throw my phone down after reading the last message that came in 2 minutes before. I needed something to distract myself with. Christmas was in 2 days. I had given up on the idea of the Christmas celebration I had had when the lockdown began, but what the hell? I could plan a party for 6 of us. Except that Lana had gone to spend some time with her parents when the lockdown began, and she still hadn't come back. And I still had never seen Gray's mum out of her room since I had started living here. So, for Gray. Okay, so we have it narrowed down to this area. I used the red Sharpie in my hand to circle an area on the large map spread out on my table. Yep, that's where a member of the Shadow Pack was last seen. How long ago was this member seen? About 15 years ago. I let out a low whistle, so this is practically a dead end. Ryan shook his head. Maybe. But then maybe not. It wouldn't cost us anything to look. I looked at Mason, who was nodding in agreement. I ran a hand through my hair. It wasn't like we had any other leads. Okay, fine. We'll go, just us three, but at the end of this month. What's the report on Scott? 2 wolves still trailing him, another 2 working on background check. It's clean up till now, but they are digging deeper, Mason said. I nodded, bouncing my leg irritably. This shit was taking longer than I wanted it to. I needed to find the fuckers that tried to take my mate and make them pay. The sight that met me when I entered the kitchen was comical. Gracie was standing on the countertop rummaging in cabinets that were made with the average height of a werewolf in mind. So bored you turned to extreme sports? I asked, forgetting that she had human hearing and there was no way she could have heard me coming. She jumped, knocking her head on the door of the cabinet, and nearly falling off the counter. I leaped forward and carried her onto safe, solid ground, laughing, your first attempt at extreme sports and you nearly break your neck. She scowled, I wasn't doing extreme sports. Why are your cabinets so freaking high? And where do you keep all your food stuff? I can't find anything. I looked around the kitchen, hoping for a large sign pointing me in the direction of whatever she was looking for. I don't know. You don't know where the food in your own kitchen is? She raised an eyebrow. I don't know. Mrs. Knightley handles that stuff. She frowned, Mrs. Knightley. Yeah. You know, the lady that cooks. You have a cook. I smiled. Where did you think all the food you have been eating since you've been here came from, baby? She smiled sheepishly, she hadn't thought about it. Why are you looking for foodstuff anyway? Christmas. I'm making dinner now. I raised an eyebrow. You can cook. You don't have to sound so surprised. Okay, sorry baby. So what's the plan for Christmas? Her face lit up, you'll see she winked. Oh, I wanted to ask, do you think can Kira come? My heart dropped. She looked so hopeful, but we were on a total lockdown. Nobody was supposed to come to the house. And even if there was no lockdown, I still wouldn't be comfortable having Kira in my house, baby. It's okay, I was just asking. She forced a smile. Okay, could you get Mrs. Knightley to show me where to find the things I need? 35, Gracie. Yeah, remember when I said I totally knew how to cook? Yeah, I totally don't. I looked down at the sauce bubbling on the cooker. I really didn't think it was supposed to be that color. Oh Lord. And I had told everybody that dinner would be ready at 7. It was 6:20 and I still needed to set the table, shower and change into clothes other than the sweatpants and stained t-shirt I was currently wearing. At least the chicken looked okay. I smiled proudly and the glistening brown pieces of bird. Mrs. Knightley, I smiled sheepishly at the lady sitting at the island, could you please help me dish out the food and set the table? I really have to go and start getting ready. Mrs. Knightley was a sweet old lady, who had apparently cooked for the Alpha family for years. She had helped me get all the stuff I needed to cook, and had offered to cook everything, but I declined her offer. Stupid. Of course, Luna, and there was that. I had told her to just call me Tamara Grace, but she insisted, saying it would be disrespectful. It felt weird to have somebody at least twice my age, bowing to me each time I walked into the kitchen. Thanks. I hurried up the stairs to my room. Thank God I had laid the dress I planned to wear on the bed earlier. I hopped in the shower, hurriedly lathering myself in soap and rinsing before hurrying out again. The dress was new. Something I had gotten after I had moved in with Gray. It was a navy blue A-line dress, stopping above my knees. It made me feel really pretty as I looked in the mirror. Not knowing what to do with my hair, I decided to pull it into a low bun. The overall look was nice enough and I pulled on shoes and left the room. I could hear the boys' voices in the dining room as I neared it. I stopped by a window and looked out. The sky was clear, with no moon in sight, making the forest at the back of the house look even darker and more ominous than usual. I shuddered involuntarily and entered the dining room. The boys stopped talking as Gray immediately made his way to me. "Gracie, you look beautiful as usual." He kissed my cheek. "Yeah, Tamara, you look great, Lana." I hugged her. "I thought you were spending Christmas with your parents." Well, I couldn't very well refuse an invitation from the alpha and his mate, could I? She winked and I laughed. I couldn't say I wasn't relieved she had come. I really needed some female company after all the time I'd spent in the house. I looked around the dining room as we sat down. A Christmas tree stood, glittering in the corner with wrapped boxes underneath it. I smiled. I couldn't wait for Gray to see what I had gotten him. "Grace balls, when do we get to dig in?" "I'm starving." Ryan whined. "After we pray." Everybody around the table echoed me incredulously. "Yes, Mum." Gray stood up, looking at the door behind me. I followed his gaze, and immediately flew out of my seat. "Mrs. Brewer, I'm so glad you could join us." The lady standing before me was beautiful, or at least, she used to be beautiful, but now she just looked tired. Very tired. She had obviously taken great efforts to prepare for the dinner. Her cheeks blushed, her lips painted, but she couldn't hide the bags under her eyes from weeks of getting no sleep. I had asked the maid who took care of her to tell her about the dinner, but I really didn't think she would be able to come. I realized we had all just been staring at her since she walked into the room. "Please, sit down." I indicated the place I had set for her in case she came. "You don't all have to look so shocked. I assure you I still eat," she chuckled as she sat down. "Mum, should you be out of bed? Are you feeling okay?" Gray seemed ready to carry her upstairs at the slightest hint at discomfort. "Gray, I am fine. This lovely girl invited me to dinner, and I accepted. There's no need for panic." She looked round the table. "What were you doing before I came?" "We were just about to pray," I said. "Pray?" she asked just as the doorbell rang. Ryan and Mason were on their feet at once. "I thought we were still under a lockdown." "Did you invite anyone else, Tamara?" Lana asked. I shook my head. I hadn't been in contact with anybody. How would I invite them? Gray stood up. "Calm down. I invited somebody." I looked at him, surprised as he headed to the door. I listened as he opened the door, heard him greet somebody and heard a woman's voice answer him. A woman. I sat up straight as I waited for him to re-enter the dining room. Ryan and Mason must have smelt something I didn't because they suddenly started growling, their eyes not leaving the door. And a second later, I understood why. "Kira." My chair nearly toppled over as I rushed towards her and hugged her. "Oh my God. What are you doing here? How are you here?" She laughed. "Well, I was invited really." I looked at Gray standing beside her and he nodded. "Thank you." I threw my arms around him. "You know I can hardly say no to you, Gracie." A place was set for Kira at the table and I sat down too. "Okay, let us pray." This time it was Kira. "Yes, pray." Why is everyone so surprised by that? "Please bow your heads." Everybody's head bowed and Gray's mother raised an eyebrow at me before bowing her head too. Father, we thank you for today and for providing for us. All glory and honor be unto your name. Amen. There was a chorus of amens around the table, and the bowl of rice was passed around. Gray choked beside me and leaned in. Gracie, I thought you said you could cook what? I lifted a forkful of rice to my mouth and immediately winced. The rice had not cooked for long enough, and I had put way too much salt in it. Grace Balls, did we offend you? Is this our punishment? Ryan tried to politely spit the food into a napkin, except that there was no way to politely spit food out. I'm sorry. Let's just eat the chicken and the salad. And then he just poured all the sand in his hair. Mrs. Brewer finished and we all laughed. Gray groaned beside me. Mum, how many more utterly embarrassing stories of me do you plan to tell this evening? I laughed. I'll be right back to hear some more. I have to use the bathroom. I left the room, a smile still lingering on my face. Apart from the whole rice disaster, the evening had turned out quite fun, and we hadn't even opened presents yet. I did my business in the bathroom, and was on my way back to the dining room, when I met Kira looking out of the same window I had looked out of earlier. Hi, she jumped, startled. Oh hi, what's up? Are you okay? Yeah, she turned to look out of the window again. The sky is so beautiful, isn't it? I looked up at the dark skies. Not really. Should we take a walk? She said suddenly. I don't know. We are under a lockdown, I'm not allowed to leave the house. Okay, then we won't go far. I just want some fresh air and I need to talk to you. She did look like she was worried about something. Okay, let's go. We went out the front door, as quietly as we could because I knew Gray would nearly explode if he knew I had stepped out of the house. We stopped when we got to the back of the house, the dark forest closer than I would have liked it. I was really worried. When you stopped coming to school, I know, I'm sorry. It's been really crazy around here. I rubbed my arms, it was quite cold. Crazy? What happened? I paused. I didn't think I should tell her about the attempted kidnap. I've just been really busy. Oh? Okay. You're really cool, Tamara that's why I'm sorry I have to do this. Before I could say another word, Kira had jammed a needle in my arm. The pain was immediate and I fell to the ground, the world growing blurry. I heard footsteps. Have you done it? It was a man's voice. Yes, she's out and I was out. 36. Gracie. I was cold and my head was pounding from all the yelling I'd done when I first woke up. I had yelled and screamed for God knows how long before the person in the cell opposite mine had chucked a wooden spoon through the bars at my head and told me to shut up. After that, I had leaned against the filthy concrete wall and thought about what had happened. Kira had kidnapped me. I found it hilarious. Gray had warned me to stay away from her but had brought her over just because I had asked him to, and she stuck a needle in my arm. I hadn't seen anybody since I woke up, just the girl in the cell opposite mine, but it was dark so I couldn't see even her properly. It seemed as if we were in some kind of prison with rows of cells on each side. I didn't know exactly how many cells there were, but the place stunk to the high heavens, so I assumed there had to be at least a few people locked up. A door clanged open and the lights went on, making me jump. I heard heavy footsteps coming down the narrow path between the two rows of cells. They walked until they stopped in front of mine. The huge man brought out a bunch of keys and stuck one in the lock of the bars. The door slid open with a squeal. I shrank back, hoping to disappear into the wall. No such luck, however. The man walked in and pulled me up by my arm. His grip was tight, and I knew there would be a red handprint later. Please, please, where are you taking me? The man ignored me, dragging me out of the cell and down the path. There was a door at the end with another man guarding it. The man opened the door, and I was dragged out, up a flight of stairs, and out another door opened by another guard. We entered the main house and headed towards an elevator. Please, I beg you. Don't take me. Please. I screamed, digging my heels into the ground, trying to pull out of his grasp. The elevator dinged and slid open. The man looked at me and sneered before throwing my inside and getting in after me. There were 5 buttons on the wall, a blank one at the very bottom, which is where I assumed we were, then 1, 2, 3, and then another blank one at the top. The man pressed the 3 and then we waited, me with tears streaming down my face and him, looking as if he'd rather be doing literally anything else. The elevator went past the other floors quickly, not stopping to let anybody on, and then we were on the 3rd floor. The man gripped my arm again and dragged me off. It was nicer up here, marble floors and high ceilings. There were a row of doors and I was dragged to the last one. There were 2 men standing outside the door, who one dragging me nodded curtly to before knocking. A muffled voice came from inside and the guy dragging me swung the door open. The room was brightly lit with large windows overlooking what looked like a field. My eyes widened as I noticed who was in the room. You? I shook, not believing what I was seeing. His bright blue eyes stared at me, unblinking, unfazed. Shut the door, he said, and I heard the door click shut behind me. You had me kidnapped. He sipped out of the glass in his hand, ignoring me. Scott. I see our human friend has arrived. Another man came striding into the room from a door behind the desk and Scott stood up. The man was tall with large muscles rippling through the shirt he was wearing. His head was shiny and bald, but he didn't look much older than grey. He smiled, showing white teeth, as he made his way towards me. I tried to step back, but the guy that had dragged me here still had a tight grip on me and he shoved me forwards instead. The man stopped in front of me, looking down at me as I tried to look anywhere else but him. Kurt, leave. The guy holding me, who apparently was Kurt, let my arm go, and I heard him leave the room. The man in front of me began walking around me, eyeing me like I was a cow he was considering buying. He came to stand in front of me again, and I still refused to meet his gaze. His hand came up and touched my face and I immediately flinched, leaning out of his grasp. He grabbed my face and jerked it upwards, holding it in place. She's not much, a little juvenile human. But her eyes, I saw Scott nodding out of the corner of my eye. Yeah. Her eyes. I noticed. They were speaking as if I wasn't in the room, like I didn't exist. Like I was a literal slab of meat. Who are you? My voice wavered. He laughed, finally letting go of my face and heading to the seat behind the desk. Darling, I go by numerous names: Alpha, Chosen One, Eric. I interrupted. Wait, you are the Chosen One? Gray hadn't told me a lot about the Chosen One. Actually, he had only told me the bare minimum, insisting that I shouldn't worry about it. He growled, never interrupt me, human. I immediately shut my mouth and watched him. Scott had sat down, and was still not looking at me. His glass was now drained. Eric ran his eyes over me once again from where he sat. Of course, she'll need to be bred and trained to our standards before the mating. Mating? My voice came out slightly above a whisper. Of course, darling, you and I are to be mated at the next full moon. I felt faint. What? No? He laughed, loud and long. It's cute that you believe you have a choice. Kurt. The door opened and Kurt walked in. Back to the dungeons. I was dismissed. I felt my arm being grabbed again. Scott. Scott, please. Please, do something. Scott. He didn't even look my way, deep in conversation with Eric. It was like I didn't exist. 37, Gray. My head hurt, my heart hurt. I was angry with everybody, but I was furious with myself. My mate was gone. And it was my fault. I pulled at my hair and ended up actually tugging some out of the roots. I let out a growl that shook the lighter items in my office. There was this weight in my chest, it made me feel like a bomb, just waiting to go off. I wanted to destroy things, people, anything. I wanted to do something, but I felt so completely helpless. Gracie had been gone for a week, and we were no closer to finding her than we were the day she was taken. I growled again, as I thought about Kira, and my own fucking stupidity. I knew she was dangerous, sure I never imagined her to be this dangerous, but I knew she was dangerous and I still let her into my house. And Scott. The son of a bitch. I wasn't surprised when we were watching the security footage, and he walked into the frame right after Kira stuck that needle in Gracie's arm. I could manage a lot of things, but I couldn't stand a liar. I pulled the door of my office open and burst into the room next door. The hum of activity in the room stopped for a second before it started again. This was the control room, aka the room where I have wolves looking for my mate 24/7. People bustling up and down, staring at computer screens with incomprehensible diagrams and figures on them. In the corner, there was a group around a table analyzing a large map. In another corner were people watching and re-watching the security footage from the night Gracie was taken, trying to find anything that could give us a clue as to where to start looking. Because honestly we had nothing. We had sent our best sniffers out to follow their trail, but they said the scent stopped right at the edge of the woods. Just disappeared. And there were no tire tracks or anything. As if Kira, Scott, and my mate simply vanished into thin air. Today was the day Ryan, Mason, and I were going to the area where a member of the Shadow Pack was last seen. I looked at the time on my phone and my jaw ticked in irritation. Where were they? Did they realize every single second counted? I walked out of the control room and immediately saw them running up to me. Sorry we are late, W. Let's go, I growled. I didn't have time for excuses. I got to my car and pulled open the door. I used too much force and the handle actually broke into my hand. Why don't you let me drive? Mason asked and I growled at him in response. He came closer. You're not calm, you're missing your mate. We could get into a car accident. Let me drive, Alpha. He made sense, he made a lot of sense. I shoved the car key into his hand and went round and got into the passenger seat. Ryan got in the back and Mason started driving. It was a nice day, one of those days that Gracie loved, warm with clear blue skies. It was weird that it was this warm in winter, but then I guess with the new year came new weather. I'd almost completely forgotten that today was New Year's Day. But somehow, I'd remembered. I sat back and looked out of the window. The car was quiet, neither of them making a peep. I wondered if they were anywhere as anxious as I was to get Gracie back. I knew Ryan had really come to care for Gracie. A fact that didn't hit me until I caught him crying after she was taken. But I wasn't sure about Mason. He was his usual stoic self. The person he had forced himself to be after what happened a few years ago. I shuddered remembering the incident and how it had broken him. I needed to get Gracie. 2 hours later and we were finally parking the car. We had to park right on the edge of the town because we didn't want to draw attention to ourselves by driving in. We would be completing the rest of the journey on foot. Summerson was a small town, smaller than Valley Hill. The difference between them was that there were no humans in Summerson, it was a wolf-only town. It was evening already, just like we had planned. Since it was a town populated by wolves, our scents wouldn't be hard to pick out. Especially mine, because I had alpha red water. We had informed the alpha of the Summerson pack that we were coming because it was practically a death sentence to go on another pack's land without permission, but we had asked him not to inform his pack of our coming because if we were really going to catch any member of Shadow Pack, the only thing we had on our side was the element of surprise. We walked by the side of the roads, into the woods, and up to the spot where we'd agreed to meet with the alpha of Summerson, Dylan. Our senses were on high alert as we waited, sniffing and listening for anything unusual. Then we heard footsteps and we all trained our eyes on the direction from which they came, ready to shift in half a second if needed. The Dylan and 2 other men appeared. Alpha Grey, it's an honor to have you on my land, Dylan said, immediately moving forward to shake my hand. He was a tall man with graying hair. I took his hand without smiling. I had no desire to be polite today. This is my beta, James, and my gamma, Mike, he said, pointing to the 2 men with him. How can we help you? I spoke. We have reports that a Shadow Pack member was last seen on your pack land. What do you know about this? The look Dylan exchanged with James was quick, but I noted it. The Shadow Pack went extinct many years ago. I don't see how there could be any on my pack land. I nodded shortly, and on cue, Ryan attacked James, Mason attacked Mike, and I landed on the Alpha. We were all still in human form, but our pack was a much stronger pack, so it was easy to overpower them. Where is the person? I screamed into Dylan's face, spit flying in different directions. I don't know what you are talking about, Dylan whimpered under me. I let my canines slide out. I could end your life in a second, or you could give me a name and a location. I have a pup on the way, PL. My eyes widened. There could be only one person that he'd be protecting this much, risking his life for. Your mate, I growled, and his eyes widened with fear. Take me to her, or I'll find her by myself. How did you know? He was shaking. How did you get mated to a Shadow Pack member? Stand up and lead the way. He stood up and we followed him. Ryan and Mason were still holding the other wolves, but I had no need to restrain Dylan. He knew it would be stupid to run when he's got so much on the line. He led us out into a clearing with a big house in the center. It was obviously the pack house, although it was much smaller than ours. But he didn't take us into the pack house, but into a smaller building by the side. It was a storage room, piled high with rubbish that they had no space for in the pack house. I've mind-linked her. She's on her way, Dylan said. I smirked. He thought we were so smart. I nodded at Mason and he passed Mike to me and left the room. Where's he going? Dylan asked, his voice shaking. I just smiled. You'll see. Mason walked in not long after with a heavily pregnant woman in tow. Lisa! Dylan cried in shock. She was running, Mason said to me. He had a traveling bag in his other hand. I clucked. I don't like people who play dirty, Dylan. I let Mike go and got a chair from the other side of the room. Please sit down, I said to Lisa. She was pregnant and I wasn't a monster. She sat down, looking at me tentatively. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and for your mate's sake and safety, I'd like you to answer truthfully. She visibly swallowed and nodded. Okay, are you a member of Shadow Pack? Her eyes widened briefly before she answered, I was. I haven't ever even met anybody from that pack. I was born in this pack. I frowned. How did that happen? My mother escaped from Shadow Pack while she was pregnant with me, and Summerson Pack took her in. She died in childbirth and I was raised by this pack. I sighed. This was hopeless. I could tell she was telling the truth, and since she was, there was no real information we could get from her about the whereabouts of Shadow Pack, since she was never even really part of the pack. I had one more question to ask out of curiosity. Shadow Pack members have yellow eyes. Even if you aren't a member, your parents were, and you have Shadow Pack red water in you. Why are your eyes blue? She smiled for the first time since she entered the room. Contact lens. We thanked Dylan, wished Lisa a safe delivery, and started our journey back home. I was furious. We had practically wasted a whole day, and we still weren't closer to finding Gracie. When we drove up to my house, I got out and slammed the door. A wolf ran out of the house to meet us. Alpha, we have news. What is it? We might have found where they are keeping her 38. Gracie. I didn't know how long I'd been in this place for, or how long it had been since I'd been taken to meet Eric. Time seemed inconsequential in the dark dungeon, where they fed me just enough to keep me alive, but not have energy to do anything, and greedy rodents scampered about. The smell in there was choking, and I still hadn't gotten used to it after being there for so long. Stale sweat, rotting things, and the God knows what else. Some of my cold soup dribbled onto my dress as I brought the spoon to my mouth. My beautiful navy blue dress, that had made me feel so pretty, was unrecognizable now. Ripped and filthy, it looked nothing like it did on Christmas Day. That whole time felt light years away. Grey, the dinner, my friends, I felt sad remembering them, but I didn't cry. I had long exhausted my tear ducts. I hadn't expected to be here for this long. I didn't think it would take Grey this long to find me. But then I didn't know how long I'd been gone for all I knew, it had only been a day or two. The door of the dungeons clanged open and the place was flooded with light. They had come for the plates. I hadn't finished my soup, so I hurriedly scooped the rest into my mouth and dropped the plate beside the door. I pushed the disgusting concoction down my throat and retreated to the corner of my cell to sleep. That's what I spent most of my time doing, sleeping. It was an escape. It was bliss to escape reality for a little while, especially my reality. The jangle of keys and the clicking of my padlock unlocking jerked my eyes open. Kurt was at my cell door. This was the first time anybody had come for me since that first day. I watched him from the corner as he removed the padlock and slid the heavy metal bars open. I didn't move, so he came in and jerked me up by my arm. I was weak, so I was much easier and lighter to handle than the last time he had come to get me. He marched me down and out of the dungeons. We got in the same elevator as before, but this time he punched the button for the second floor. I wasn't going to meet Eric. We waited in silence as the box moved up and got out when it stopped. This floor was a bit different from the third floor, not by a lot, but there were subtle changes. Instead of marble floors, there were plain ceramic tiles, there was a vase with flowers in it, and there were a lot more doors. Kurt stopped at one and pushed it open without knocking. There were 4 women inside, who were obviously expecting us. "Sam, you look lovely today as usual." I jumped a bit when Kurt spoke. Kurt could speak. I looked up at him and he was actually smiling. "Wow." One of the ladies, who I assumed was Sam, came forward, determinedly avoiding Kurt's eyes and trying not to smile. "Hi, miss. We've received instructions for you. If you'd please step this way," Sam said. Kurt released me and I followed her directions. "We can take care of her, sir," Sam said, grimacing and looking pointedly at Kurt. His smile dropped and he nodded once before going out of the room. I wonder what the story between them was, because there was definitely a story. Sam led me to another door and opened it, revealing a bathroom. "Alpha requested the total package, so that begins with a bath," Sam explained. She was about my age. I noticed now that I was closer, maybe a year or 2 older. It was weird to be addressed as I nodded. "My name is Tamara Grace." My voice cracked from lack of use. She nodded without smiling. "Sam, if you would please undress, your bath water is ready." I stood, waiting for her to leave until I realized she wasn't planning to. "I can bathe myself. It's my job, besides." She looked away. "We aren't allowed to leave you alone." I swallowed the lump in my throat, willing myself not to cry. I was a prisoner. "I'm not going to jump out the window," I snapped at her, and shut the door in her face. There was no lock, so I stood, hoping that she would allow me this bit of privacy. The door handle didn't twist, so I assumed she had given in. I looked around the bathroom. It was all white, from the tub to the tiles, everything. And there was a window. I eyed the door one more time before rushing to the window. It was high, so I had to climb into the toilet seat to reach it. I quickly realized that it was too small for me to get through it. It was designed to let light and air in, but not let out anything larger than a small child. Even then, we were on the second floor, high above the ground so it'd be stupid to try anything. I got off the toilet seat as quietly as possible, and was headed to the tub when my reflection caught my eye. I stopped, letting my eyes run over the girl in the mirror. My skin was covered in filth and my hair was matted and almost brown. I looked away, hurriedly taking off my formerly pretty blue dress and getting in the tub. It was big enough to let the water cover my chest and my knees at the same time, which I was grateful for. The water was blissful. Warm and floral scented. I picked up the bar of soap by the tub and run it over my skin, washing the dirt away. Then I picked the coconut milk shampoo and put a large glob on my hand and massaged it into my hair, detangling with my fingers. After I was sure I was clean and the water in the tub wasn't clear nor warm anymore, I got out and wrapped myself in the fluffy robe that lay folded by the door, determinedly avoiding the mirror. I opened the door and stepped out. The 4 women were gathered together whispering, but stopped immediately they noticed me. "I hoped you enjoyed the bath," Sam asked, coming forward. Next, I was laid on a massage table and had different lovely smelling oils rubbed into my skin. Then it was time for hair. One of the other women sat me in front of a mirror, lifting strands of my hair and letting them fall back with a thoughtful look on her face. I jumped up when she picked up a pair of scissors. "No, your hairstyle is tired, do not cut my hair." I was dead serious. I loved my hair long and so did Gray. She rolled her eyes but nodded and I returned to the chair. She did a silk press instead, leaving my hair feeling soft around my neck. Then makeup. I wondered, as I sat there with brushes running up and down my face, what this primping was for. Sam had said that Alpha had requested the total package for me, meaning Eric. And so I wondered, why did Eric want me all dressed up? What am I getting ready for? It was one of the other women that answered, "Alpha is hosting a New Year's party today." New Year? I'd been here a week. And why exactly did Eric want me attending his party anyway? When they were done, Sam unzipped a dress bag I hadn't noticed and brought out a stunning red dress. "Alpha requested that you wear this," Sam said. The fact that I had no choice changed it from a request to an order, but I put the dress on. The tight fabric left little to the imagination, with net being the dominant material. I shook my head, peeling the dress off me. "I'm not wearing that." I carefully put it on the couch, and put the robe back on. The women exchanged looks. "The Alpha," one of them began. "I don't care what Eric says, I'm not going half without clothes." Just then the door opened and in walked the devil himself. He was dressed in a dark suit and a white shirt, instantly dominating the room, with his mere presence, the presence of a man accustomed to absolute power. His eyes settled on me before he addressed the women. "Why is she not dressed? Who does he think he is, always talking as if I'm not in the room? She is not dressed because she is not wearing the thing you assume is a dress." His eyes darkened and something shot through them before they went back to normal. The corner of his mouth lifted. He found this amusing. "Get her something else." One of the women scurried from the room and the silence in her wake was deafening. I maintained eye contact with Eric, not backing down when he clearly expected me to. The woman returned with another red dress. What was the deal with red? I took the dress from her and stared pointedly at Eric. He was still smirking and stared back at me with his yellow eyes, not having any plans of moving. I huffed and entered the bathroom and put the dress on. The dress wasn't exactly church material with its plunging neckline, but it was a lot better than the previous option. I sighed and stepped out of the bathroom. Eric appraised me from top to bottom before turning to the women. "Good job." They seemed to swell under their Alpha's commendation, bright grins lighting up their faces. "Let's go, we don't have all night." I pulled on the shoes they had provided and followed him out of the room. "Okay, juvenile, I want you on your best behavior. Lots of smiles but very little talk." He held out his arm for me to take. I stared at it, eyebrow raised. Why exactly do you think I'm going to do anything you say? His yellow eyes flashed amber. I might have accommodated the little show you put on about the dress, but how about you try disrespecting me and I slit your skinny human throat? I took his arm. 39, Grey. Recap Alpha. We have news. What is it? We might have found where they are keeping her and now might. I barked at the pup in front of me while he cowered. Well. I pushed past him and made a beeline for the control room. Somebody tell me what is going on, stat. One of the men, Mike, stood up. Well, Alpha, we had been trying to trace them from our end, but like in the security footage, it seemed like they just vanished into thin air. So we decided to try from their end. We asked people to let us know any house or area in their town that was secretive and large, because we figured the chosen one would have a sort of pack house, or something for his followers. We've been getting all sorts of tips, but they didn't fit the description, but finally we got one yesterday, and even though the newer maps don't show it, the older ones point out that area as Shadow Pack territory. And there have been reports of suspicious activity in a house there over the past few weeks, he finished. Mason and Ryan had joined us somewhere during the story and we are standing behind me. Well, why the fuck are you wolves still sitting on your haunches doing nothing? My heart thumped wildly in my chest. Could we really have found her? Tell the warriors to get ready, we are leaving in 5 minutes. Mason touched my shoulder. Grey, shouldn't we have a plan? I brushed him off. No time. It's not smart to go rushing there without a plan. Look. Every second my mate spends with those people, her life is in danger. I am not going to waste more time trying to figure out a plan. If you don't want to come, then stay here, but do not slow me down. He looked at me for a while. Of course I'm coming, I nodded shortly. Then get the fuck ready. Everybody rushed around and were packed into the truck in time. Me, Ryan, Mason, and one of the people from the control room, Mike, got into another truck and the journey began. The journey took 6 hours, and most people were already asleep, seeing as we had traveled through the night. Wake the fuck up. I screamed through Mind Link. I heard groans as the lazy wolves jumped awake. We had gotten to the town where the supposed house was but hadn't yet gotten to the house. I cursed as the sun rose higher and higher on the horizon. I would have much preferred doing this at night. The dark was an intruder's best friend. Turn right here, Mike's voice came from the back. I turned and we continued on for a while until he suddenly shouted stop. And I jerked the car to a halt. I apologize, Alpha, but we have to stop here. The house is 2 blocks away, but we have to cover the rest on foot. I communicated the new development to the wolves in the other truck and everybody came out of the trucks. The house was surrounded by tall trees and it seemed like the perfect place to hide someone, but as we got closer, it felt wrong. It was a warehouse, tall and nondescript. Okay, boys. All the people that were in the second truck go to the back of the warehouse. The rest of will go in from the front. There was a quiet chorus of yes, Alpha, and everybody got into position. As we approached the front entrance, I realized we hadn't seen any guards. Something was way off. We approached one of the 5 garage door-like doors, and there was a button beside it to push to open the door. I hit the button and the door began to slide excruciatingly slowly up. When it was halfway up, we ducked under it and entered the warehouse. It was dark, pitch black, with the only source of light being the light flooding in from the door behind us. This wasn't right. This place didn't have the slightest whiff of Gracie. Instead, it was full of weird scents. I was about to tell my men to retreat when the door we had come in through suddenly slid down and shut. The lights in the warehouse came on and then we noticed we were surrounded. Gracie. The party was boring, even more so because I had to hold Eric's arm and circulate around the room, nodding politely to strangers who looked at me strangely. The good part was that I had eaten a lot of the hors d'oeuvres that the waiters carried around. After eating gruel for the past week, the change was welcome. I wondered what Eric's endgame here was. Who shows off somebody they kidnapped? Some of them are weakening. We should have their alpha soon enough, one of the guests, a man sporting a blue bow tie and greasy hair finished. I cursed myself for tuning out. Which alpha were they talking about? Was it Gray? Then we moved to the front of the room where Eric took a microphone. He tapped the head once or twice to draw attention to himself, which was needless because all eyes were him all the time. Dear friends, I thank you all for honoring my invitation to celebrate the new year. A lot of you might be wondering who this beautiful woman on my arm is. Well, I'll be glad to inform you that with the new year came a special gift for me. She and I will be mated in 3 weeks. The entire room broke into applause as the air available for me seemed to become less and less. I couldn't breathe. I needed to get out of there. I let go of Eric's arm and sprinted from the room in a manner not unlike Cinderella. I ran around the house wildly, the walls seemed to be closing in on me. I couldn't find the exit. My chest was burning and I finally traced down the room that I had gotten ready in. I kicked off my shoes without stopping and burst into the bathroom. I jumped onto the toilet seat and stuck my head out of the window, taking greedy gulps of the cool air. The large balls of tears rolling down my cheek were mixing with the sweat my face was coated with after all my running. I couldn't do this. I couldn't get mated to that man. I had waited, telling myself that Gray couldn't be that far off. He was coming to rescue me. He would save me like he always promised he would. But as I stepped out of the dress and collapsed on the floor, as my hot skin met the cool marble floor, as fatigue descended on me and my consciousness slowly slipped away, I realized I had to save myself. Gray we fought, some in wolf form, some in human form. But the battle wasn't that hard. It was as if whoever had sent them had sent their most inexperienced wolves. In 20 minutes, 22 men lay on the floor, their souls gone, one had managed to escape, and we had one, bound up and sedated to take back to the pack house and interrogate. I was furious, I had failed, yet again to get Gracie back. Of the 4 warriors that had gone round the back, 3 of them had been slacked with silver, and it was running quickly through their veins. They needed medical attention and fast. We trooped back to the trucks, dragging the sedated man along. But all our tires had been slashed, every single one lay flat on the ground. Fuck. I kicked one of the trucks. Somebody tell me we have first aid kits. Glove compartment, Alpha. I dropped the man I was dragging on the floor, and got out the first aid kit. I looked inside and thankfully there were enough materials to do the job. I mind-linked the warriors we had left at the pack and asked them to start heading over with 3 trucks and to bring the pack doctor with them. Then I started working on the injured men. I sterilized the scissors with some spirit and then cut away the part of the men's skin that was touched by the silver, cleaned the cut, and bandaged them up. They would still need medical attention for the silver that had already gotten into their red water, but they would be okay. I sighed and collapsed onto the seat, staring at the now bright sky, wondering if my Gracie was doing the same. 40. Gracie, there's something movies and fairy tales conveniently leave out of their stories. The prince doesn't always come for the damsel. Sometimes, Sleeping Beauty doesn't get awakened. Rapunzel remains in the tower. Cinderella remains a maid forever. Sometimes, the damsel either has to conform to what seems like her destiny, or save herself. I had conformed long enough and my prince had actually come once. Gray had saved me from my parents. But this time, my savior might just be yours truly. Fear is the mind killer. And fear was exactly what was going to drive me. I didn't have a plan. Which I knew was stupid. But I had a goal to get the hell out of that place. I sat in front of the mirror and styled my hair, catching the eye of my captor behind me in the reflection. I smiled, letting my lips curl upward, willing it to reach my eyes. I had woken up in Eric's bed, swathed in his heavy sheets, without having any recollection of how I got there, although it wasn't that hard to figure out since I remembered falling asleep on the bathroom floor. After the initial shock wore off that I was in his bed, I realized I could use that to my advantage because it meant 1. That I wasn't going back to the dungeons. 2. That the fool had either begun to trust me or underestimated me enough to let me into his space. And boy, was I not going to let that go. "You seem different," he commented, knotting his tie. It was weird that the few times I'd seen him, he'd never been in casual clothes. My smile remained on my face and I had to put conscious effort into not letting it slip into a grimace. Different. Docile fool. Eric, I had realized, was not used to people standing up to him. Everybody around him treated him with not polite consideration, but groveling deference. Which was easy for me, seeing as that was basically all I'd done while I was at my parents'. I shrugged, letting my expression droop. "Doesn't seem like I'm getting out of here anytime soon, might as well start adjusting." He smiled as he shrugged his suit jacket on. "Just the attitude you should have, human." And he left. Clothes in my exact size had been arranged on one side of Eric's walk-in closet. Everything was there from ball gowns to underwear, which I found more than creepy. I pulled on a pair of jeans and a sweater. Despite there not being a lot of snow, it was still the middle of winter. After playing with it, I decided to just leave my hair down. I walked out of the room and realized we were on a floor I hadn't been on before. I walked to one of the windows and looked out. I was shocked that instead of overlooking just a large expanse of land like I'd expected, since I believed we were in the middle of nowhere, the window actually overlooked a small town. There were little houses with gardens that would be green and lush in any other season, and there were people actually walking about. What the hell was going on? From all the contact I'd had with werewolves, namely Gray's pack, I'd come to understand that they valued and highly preferred extreme privacy. Look at Gray's house, it was almost impossible for a human to find. So why did these wolves have their house in plain sight? It might make things easier for me, seeing as I would be able to ask people for help if no when I escape, but then what if they were in on it? What if it was a town full of wolves, which is why there was no need for the house to be hidden? I backed away from the window and looked around the floor. Eric's room seemed to be the only room on the floor. Typical, an entire floor to himself. I got into the elevator, which seemed to remain permanently open, as if Eric had to make quick exits frequently. I looked at the buttons and decided to go down to the first floor. Start from the bottom. The ground floor was by far the most populated floor, with door on both sides covering the length of the corridor. I moved in the direction that the most noise seemed to be coming from and found myself in a kitchen, a large kitchen bustling with activity. There were ladies and young boys alike rushing around, all busy with something or the other. Some were chopping vegetables, some frying some things, some others washing fruits. It was crazy. I stood in the middle of the chaos seemingly unnoticed until a woman shoved some items into my hands as she hurried past. Stunned, I looked down at the items and found a bowl of carrots, a chopping board, and a knife. "Don't just stand there, get to chopping. I need those in 5 minutes," she said without stopping. I thought about protesting and pointing out that I wasn't there to work, but then thought, what the hell, why not? I found a space on the counter beside a girl who was chopping onions with tears running down her face and began chopping. I might not win the World's Best Cook award anytime soon, but I sure as hell could chop. I focused on chopping the carrots into cubes and cut my finger in the process. Awesome. Carrots. I heard somebody yell a few times and vaguely wondered what all the noise was about. "That's you know," the girl next to me said between sniffles. My eyes widened as I rushed over to the woman and handed her my bowl of the neatly chopped carrots. "Dear me, a minute longer and the food would have been ruined. Girl. The girl that was next to me delivered her onions with onion-induced squinted eyes before turning to me. Come on, your cut has to be treated, she said, gesturing for me to follow her. I hesitated, it was just a small cut, but went with her. She edited through a different door than the one I came in through. Behind the door was another long corridor. Just how big was this place? With a lot of doors. This corridor was visibly different from any of the other ones I'd been on. The walls were dirty, the rug covered the entire length of the floor was almost threadbare from being swept too many times, there were no ornate decorations lining the walls. The girl stopped in front of one of the doors, produced a key from her apron and the door was soon unlocked revealing a small bedroom. I came to the stark realization that these were the servants' quarters and that was why Eric, the pompous prick, had gone out of his way to make it as dismal as possible. Home sweet home, she trilled as she invited me in. Nice place, I wasn't being sarcastic. She had done a lot with what she was given. The normally small, almost prison-like room had been transformed into a cozy living space with the help of her bright decorations. Thanks, have a seat. I should have some first aid stuff somewhere around here. Seeing as the only place in the room where I could have a seat was the bed, I balanced gingerly on the edge of it, looking around as I waited to find the kit she was looking for. There was a picture frame on the little table beside her bed containing a little boy and girl grinning wide in front of some trees. Are these your I paused children? She didn't look much older than me, but she could have 2 kids, I think. I decided to go with the safer option, siblings. She stuck her head out of the cupboard she was peering into and came over with the materials. Ah yes, Diego and Gloria. She picked up the frame, smiling fondly at the happy children, then snapping out of it, she turned to me, okay, let's see that finger. I held out my index finger. The cut wasn't that deep, so it had already stopped bleeding. She cleaned it with some cotton wool before placing a little yellow band-aid over it. Not that I don't appreciate it, but what's with all the hospitality? The cut wasn't that deep. I had to ask. She smiled as she packed up the stuff she had used. You knew. I just wanted to make you feel better about being in an unfamiliar place. It suddenly hit me, you know how I got here. We have to get going, I have to set the table for lunch. She returned her stuff to where she'd gotten them, hurrying to the door. I went after her, you know. You have to help me, please. I'm begging you. Get me out of here. We had reached the door that went back out into the kitchen, and she turned to me. Why do you think I work in the kitchen? I'm an Omega, Tamara, I'm powerless. She opened the door and then I noticed that it was eerily silent. The noise and bustle that had dominated the place earlier was totally gone, and then I saw why. What the fuck is going on here? 41, Grey. She pranced through the field as if she had no care in the world, her blonde hair flying in the wind. I'm gonna catch you. I yelled as I ran after her. She giggled. It was clear and beautiful as the wind carried the sound over to me. You wish, Brewer. She stuck out her tongue at me as she started running as fast as she could. I ran behind her for a little while. I could easily catch her, but I loved how happy she looked when she thought she was winning. She stopped ahead, and you call yourself a werewolf? I'm just a little human, and I outrun you. She stuck out her tongue again. I laughed, it bubbled from my chest, a laugh only she could bring out of me. I easily ran up to her, pulling her so she fell on the soft grass. Hi, little human. She pouted, jutting out her lip, you caught me, I'll always be there to catch you. My eyes flew open, as if I'd been stung, the dream disappearing before my eyes. I lived in a constant red haze now, alternating between dreaming of Gracie or thinking about her. My mate had been gone too long, and my wolf was acting out. I was more wolf than man these days, and there were just a few moments when I was the one actually in charge of my actions. Werewolves weren't made to be away from their mates. They were extremely possessive creatures, which was why they marked their mate immediately they found them. Being away from a marked mate was difficult, but being away from an unmarked one was downright maddening, and it was even worse when one of the mates had alpha red water. In one of my saner moments, I wondered if Gracie was as affected as I was. If she was a werewolf, then there would be no question about it. She would be going crazy, but her being fully human, I wondered. I sat down now in the back of my mind watching my wolf pace up and down the cell. I had asked to be thrown one of our strongest cells when I noticed my wolf getting stronger. I hadn't shifted in a long while, but my wolf was getting stronger. It was easy now for him to force me to the back of my own mind and take over my human body. I had tried to fight him in the earlier days, sometimes spending hours battling him for control of my body, but recently I had given up. What was the use? So what if I was in charge of my actions? I couldn't rescue Gracie. Which was why I'd asked to be put in a cell. I didn't want to inadvertently harm one of my pack members while he was in control. Come on, Gray, let's go out for a while. Mason stood outside my cell, his eyes wide with caution. My wolf ignored him and so did I. You have to get some fresh air. You've been in here for days. It'll be good for both your wolf and you. You don't even have to interact with anybody. We'll just drive around town. You've gone downhill, Gray. You wouldn't want her to see you like this. My wolf wanted to lunge at him for bringing her up, but he was right. I would hate for Gracie to see me so weak. It took a moment for me to push my wolf back and take back control over my body. Okay, let's go. He grinned and pulled on the rubber gloves he'd brought with him and unlocked the heavy silver door. It didn't take a lot to restrain a werewolf, you just needed a lot of silver. He stepped back as I stepped forward. Okay, first of all, shower, he fake gagged. Ha, very funny but true. I went up the stairs to my room, stopping briefly to stare at Gracie's door. I hadn't been in there since she left. It was hard enough being in my own room. She had only spent a short while here, but her scent was everywhere. But what stopped me now was that it wasn't. Her scent was fading, very soon it would be gone completely, and it would be as if she was never here. As if she had only been a figment of my imagination. She was perfect enough to be. I took a quick shower, not wanting to linger, and rejoined Mace downstairs. We got in my car, him driving, and took off into town. The benefits of living on the outskirts was that I was far away from people. Cons? That I was far away from people. Meaning I had no idea what was going on in town. I didn't know if anybody else knew Gracie was missing. I doubted it though. They would have noticed our absence, but I doubted any humans would know she had been abducted. So what's been going on in the pack? Ryan and Mason had been left in charge of running the pack. It was a big pack and wolves needed leadership to function properly, someone to look up to. But as their alpha was out of commission, they had been put under their beta and theta instead. Okay. Marie and John had another baby, so they had to be relocated to another part of the house, he explained. I nodded. Marie had 5 kids with the new one being the 6th. When families in the pack expanded, they needed more space. Although we couldn't always accommodate that need, a family of 8 couldn't be expected to live in the 2-bedroom suites almost everybody else had. Lizzie is moving out next week. Got into college, so Jules and Nate are off. I completed. Lizzie was an only child and her parents always had a plan to travel around the world once their little girl was off to college. That dream had been delayed a few years when Lizzie kept failing her SATs, and it seemed like the college thing might never happen. But now it had, and I was genuinely happy for them. We pulled into the parking lot of the diner, and I pulled up the hood of my hoodie as we walked inside. The good thing about this town is that nothing ever changed, so even though everything at home was different with Gracie's absence, everything else in the town was the same. The diner was no different. Oh look, Lucy's here. Mace pointed to one of the booths where sure enough, I could see the sunshine blonde hair that could only belong to the girl. I'll get us a seat. I want a cheeseburger. I really didn't want to have to interact with anybody unnecessarily, but I nodded and went on to the counter. Hi, what can I get for you? It was a guy. Cheeseburger and a soda, and my stomach churned at the thought of the greasy foods that filled the menu, a bottle of water. I gazed unseeingly at a drop of ketchup on the counter that whoever had wiped it down had missed until the guy returned with my order. I grabbed it and realized that Mason was sitting with Lucy. Why the hell he had done that, I had no idea. I slid into the booth next to him and pulled my hood down lower. Thanks, he said, grabbing his food. Hi, Grey. Lucy smiled brightly in my direction, and I ignored her. My leg was bouncing, an involuntary movement that only happened when I was anxious. I wanted to go back home. What if they had news about Gracie, and I was so far away? Her smile dimmed. They still haven't found that girl. That girl, she has a name, I grit out. She laughed nervously and I heard her heart rate pick up. Right, sorry. Tamara Grace. There's still no news. Meet me in the car, I said to Mason before standing up and walking out. I heard him scrambling up behind me and apologizing to Lucy. Grey, wait up, he caught up to me as I neared the car. Mr. Grey Brewer. I turned toward the voice to find a police officer, with 3 others behind him, and Mason staring wide-eyed behind them. I wasn't in the mood for this shit today. Yes? You're under arrest for the kidnapping of a Tamara Grace finally, and for having relations with a minor. What the fuck? Please turn around and put your hands behind your back. Please know that anything you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. I had a strong feeling to make a run for it, but I couldn't leave my pack. I followed the officer's instructions and felt the heavy cuffs close around my wrists. I'll meet you at the station, were the last words I heard from Mason before I was pushed into the backseat of the police car. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode of the story, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe to get notifications for updates.